Hello and welcome to Let's Start Cooking. I'm Wayne, and if this is your first time here, thank you for joining us today. And if this is not, and you've been a viewer from before, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do a recipe that it was kind of really popular about 20 years ago, and for some reason it kind of died out. Not too many people make it anymore. But what we're going to do today is we're going to actually make chicken croquettes. And the first thing that we're going to want to start with is we have just regular thin sliced chicken breast. Now, you can use the regular chicken breast. We just use thin, because what we're going to do with this is after we cook this, we're going to let this cool down and we're going to actually finely chop this. So it's easier just to use thin breast. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our heat going. We're just going to add just a little bit of olive oil. Even though this is a non-stick, I still like to use a little bit of oil. I like it, the flavor it gives to it. So we're not going to use a lot, just a little bit. So what we're going to do to start with is we're just going to take our chicken breast, and we don't have to try to get them all in here at the same time. Just lay them in nice and flat. And you don't have to use olive oil. You can use regular oil. You can use spray if you feel more comfortable. But we're using the thin slice because it's going to cook a lot quicker for us. And we don't have to, we don't have to use real thick chicken breast because we're going to chop this up anyway. We're just going to get this cooked up. Like I said, it's not going to take long for these. And then we're going to set them on a separate plate, and we're just going to let these cool down. It doesn't take long at all when you're working real thin. And again, I'm going to have all the ingredients in our description. We're not looking to brown these. We're looking to make sure that they're cooked through, but we don't really necessarily want to brown these because again, we're going to be adding this to all kinds of ingredients and we're going to cook them even more. So we want to make sure these stay nice and tender for us, and since they are thin, we don't want to cook these really to the brown. We just want to get a nice cook thoroughly through, and that way we can continue on. But we're going to set these aside and we're going to let them cool off anyway, because we're going to end up chopping these up. Once our chicken is cooked, all we're going to do is we're going to remove this. And if your chicken had a lot of water in it, like unfortunately mine happened to have because they were frozen, what we're going to do is we're going to take these out, we're going to let these cool, and we're just going to pat them down and make sure we get any excess water or moisture off of them. But for now, we're just going to take these off, and we're going to let these cool off to the side. We're going to get our mess cleaned up, and then we're going to start to make our roux, and we're going to let that cool off. So we'll get this cleaned up, and then we'll start our roux. Now, for our next step, what we're going to do, we're just going to make a simple roux to start with, and what we want to do is we're going to take our butter, which is about 3 tablespoons, and we're just going to melt this butter down. And we're going to make sure we get this completely melted down, because we want to make sure that when we add our flour, we want to make a nice paste out of this. So we're just going to let this melt. And this is where you want to be careful. Don't turn the heat up too high. We don't want this to start to boil. We just want to melt it. Because we are going to add flour to this. And if the pan is too hot, this is going to dry out really quick when the flour hits. And we don't want to burn it to the bottom of the pan. So what we want to do is just melt this down nice and gentle. And once we get the butter melted completely, what we're going to do is we're going to add our flour. And then when we add the flour, like I said, this is going to want to hit and it's going to want to dry this out pretty quickly. So we want to make sure we keep mixing this as we dump this in. We don't want this to hit the very bottom and just stick right to the pan on us. And what we want to do with this is we want to cook this for about a minute or two. Because if any of you have ever made gravy or went to somebody's house and they had gravy, and you tasted it and you said, boy, you could taste the flour. And the reason that is because if you don't cook this long enough, it retains that flour taste. So we want to make sure that we cook that flour taste out. So we're going to cook this for a little bit, and we're going to keep it moving. And as you see how we got a really nice paste, and that's what we want. We want to keep it like this before we actually go on to our next step. We want to make sure that we cook that flour out of this. Once we get to that point, what we're gonna do now is we're gonna add our milk. And I'm just using regular milk. We're just gonna slowly add this in. And what we're gonna wanna do with this, we're gonna wanna cook this for a couple minutes. Could take as long as 5, but this is gonna start to thicken up for us. And once we see that it starts to thicken, we're gonna remove this from the heat. This time we're gonna add our salt and pepper. Now you can do this to your taste. You don't have to go by, I'm not gonna sit there and tell you add 1/2 teaspoon. This is gonna be entirely up to you. Some people like more pepper. Some people don't like a whole lot of salt. So we're just gonna add our salt and pepper. And we're just gonna keep this roux going. And it'll seem like it's not working, then all of a sudden you'll see it does really start to thicken up. And that's what we wanna see. But you wanna keep stirring this because as this starts to thicken, it's gonna wanna stick to the bottom. Now as you can see, you see how thick it got. And that's what we're looking for. It's nice and thick. You see how it's sticking to everything? That's what we wanted. So now what we're gonna do, we're gonna remove this from the heat and we're gonna set this to the side and we're gonna let this cool down to room temperature. And this is gonna thicken up even more as it cools down. But we just wanna get this off the heat and we're gonna let this cool down and then we're gonna let our chicken cool down. Now that we have our sauce cooling down and we've left our chicken cool down, what we wanna do is we're gonna take all this now, we're gonna combine it in our food processor and we're gonna have this finely chopped. Now, of course, you can do it with a knife if you want, but you can do it in a food processor or you can do it in a blender. Now, we don't wanna go too far and make this into a paste, but we just want this chopped up fine enough that we can roll this into a ball. So we're just gonna help this chicken out just a little bit. We're just gonna cut it up in strips, just so we can have something a little bit smaller to throw into the processor. That's all. Just take this, we're gonna chop this up. And again, as you can see, the chicken is the star of the show here. We don't want to use a whole lot of vegetables, especially when it comes to pepper and celery, because it does have a distinct flavor. And we don't want this to be the star of the show. We want the chicken. So we're just gonna make this a little bit easier for everything to go in. We're just gonna add everything in, including our vegetables. And we're not gonna be, like I said, we're not gonna be careful with it. We're just gonna throw it in. Now I would put things in one at a time, but what's gonna happen is, as we pulsate this, it's gonna wanna chop all this up, and I don't want the chicken to get really fine on me. So I wanna do it all at the same time. So this might get a little bit noisy, so. Just lay that to the side. See if we can get our cutter out without making too much of a mess. We'll get this out. And this is about what you want. As you can see how small we got this. That's about what we want. We don't want to go any finer than that because, again, we're not trying to make a paste. And that's where we're at now with this. And now what we're going to do is we're going to set this aside. Now we're going to get all our other ingredients ready, because what we're going to do is we're going to put this all into a ball and we're going to actually make our croquettes now. Now that we have all the prep work done, now what we're going to do is we're going to take our mixture. I'm just going to get it out of our bowl here. And what we have is we have just a medium bowl. And we're just going to take all this. Now, as you've seen, as I was dumping this out, I've seen a couple big pieces, so we'll take care of them because we want everything to be about equal. We'll get all this emptied out. And if you see any big pieces, like we've seen fall in there, like this pepper, we're going to take this out, and what we'll do is we'll end up chopping this up just a little bit smaller. But we just don't want to have really big pieces because, again, we're going to make little croquettes out of this, and we don't want big chunks like this to stick out. But now that we have that, we'll lay that to the side, and we'll chop that up later. We're going to take our salt, our pepper, We have garlic powder. And we have onion powder. And we're going to take that and we're just going to put it right in. And then on top of that, the mixture that we made, our roux, as you can see, really thickened up. But that's what we want. We want a nice thick roux because we're going to add this right to our mixture of our chicken. We're going to get all that in there. Make sure we get all this goodness out of here because we want all of this. And we're just going to mix this all together now. And again, if you see any bigger pieces that you see as we mix, we'll just pull them out. We'll just make sure we chop them up a little finer. And once we get this mixed up, what we're going to do is we're going to cover this with plastic. And we're going to put it in the refrigerator for 30 minutes. And we're going to let this chill and set up for us. So now we'll get this all mixed up. We'll put it in the refrigerator for 30 minutes and we'll be right back. Okay, we are back. We have our oil that's heating up right now, but what we want to do is we've taken our chicken out of the refrigerator and we have about 1.5 cups of panko breadcrumbs. These are just plain, and we have 3 eggs, and all we're going to do is we're just going to quick mix these up. And all we're doing this for is we're going to end up breading these, but we're going to double bread these. We're going to put them in egg, we're going to put them in breadcrumbs, and then we're going to put them back in our egg and then back in our breadcrumbs before we actually fry them. So you just want to make sure we get this mixed up fairly well. We're not going to add anything to the egg mixture. We're not going to add anything to the breadcrumbs. All our seasoning, everything is already done. Now again, I use 3 eggs, 1.5 cups of breadcrumbs. You can always add more, a little less. You don't know how much it's going to use until you actually start doing what you're doing. Now what I do, I don't recommend making these really, really big because don't forget, we do have raw vegetables in here. And if you make them too big and you put them in a fryer, they're going to get done on the outside before they get nice and done in the inside. So I usually just use a regular ice cream scooper. And when I make them, I make it to flatten it out. Just like that. Because I only want about tablespoon and a half of mixture. And I want to gently roll these up. Just like that. And we're going to put them in our egg. And you have to be careful because they are going to be really soft. But we'll handle that once we get the breadcrumbs on them once or twice. They'll solid up for us. And then we're going to put these back in. And again, you have to be careful with them because they are soft, but we want them soft. And we're going to put them back in our egg mixture. And then we're going to make sure that we make a nice round ball out of it. And we're just going to take them, we're going to lay them right on the paper like that. And we're going to complete all this before we start with our fryer. Once we have all of our croquettes formed and breadcrumbs on and eggs, and we've heated up our oil to 350 degrees. Now depending on what oil you're using, just be careful of that temperature because vegetable oil will start to smoke at about 350 degrees, but you just want to be careful what oil you use because if it starts to smoke, that means it's starting to overheat and you don't want that. So we're going to put these in, and what we're going to do, we're only going to put about 3 or 4 of these in at a time. And we're just going to gently lay them in because we don't want to overcrowd these. And what we want to do is we're going to cook these now until they're nice golden brown. And we just want to let these go now. And we're going to, like I said, we're going to fry these till they're nice golden brown. Because again, don't forget, we have raw vegetables in there, and we don't want to cook. That's why we didn't want to make them so big. Because if we would have made them too big, they would cook on the outside before they got nice and soft and cooked on the inside. Now we've had these cooking for about 5 minutes. Like I said, this is where you use your judgment. They're nice golden brown. And if you're really not sure, you can always get yourself a thermometer, a quick check, and you want to check. Because remember, everything in here has been cooked We just don't want the centers to be cold yet. So what we're gonna do now is we're just gonna take these out, nice and brown, and you can tell they got nice and crust on them. And we're just gonna set these to the side, and we're gonna let these drain off for a little bit. You can smell the onion, the garlic coming out of this. You can even smell the celery. So we'll let these sit for a little bit, and we'll get the rest of these done. All right, we are back. We got all our croquettes fried up. We have the other ones that are cooling off right now, and we took one to show you because unlike the croquettes you used to buy in the store, these are nice and creamy inside because of the roux that we made to mix everything together. Now if you listen to this. Nice crunch. And you see they're nice and creamy inside because that's what we want. Store-bought croquettes usually have a breading and they're so dry. These you don't need gravy or anything for. So we just take a little bit, and I know they're gonna be hot, but I can already smell the onions, the pepper. You can smell the garlic coming out of this. Nice and creamy. All the flavors shine through for this. It's not over peppered, it's not salty. Again, it's not breaded. So it's not packed with bread. All we did was put a coating on it so you actually get to taste the chicken. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you'll like and share with your friends and give us a thumbs up and hit that notification button so you can get all our videos and you get notified whenever we make a new one. And I will see you next week.